We have arrived at an agreement with the British government on an ordered withdrawal of the United Kingdom from the European Union and also on the framework for our future relationship. This is the result of intensive work on the part of the two negotiating teams, and I'd like to thank them in person. Obviously, the British team and our own team for their tenacity and professionalism. I'd also like to point to the results from a European side on the basis of permanent dialogue and real confidence that's been built over the last 3 years with the 27 member states, with the European Parliament. I can tell you, as you know, we really have built our positions together on our side and this new agreement. This agreement has been agreed between negotiators with President Juncker this morning with Prime Minister Johnson. He concluded this, and he will present this later on at the European Council of the 27. I would also like to offer my personal thanks to him for his confidence over the last 3 years. I'd like to thank President Donald Tusk on the Council side and his whole team. That is who I wish to thank. This text should provide legal certainty in every area where Brexit, like any separation, creates uncertainty, and in particular, and first and foremost, for citizens, for European citizens in the United Kingdom and British citizens living in one of our member states. These citizens have always been and will remain our priority, that of member states, and I can also tell you that will be the case for the European Parliament. Uncertainty for those citizens has been going on for too long. Thanks to their agreement, their rights will at last be guaranteed on a sustainable basis. We also have certainty for a whole host of project leaders receiving funding from the EU budget in the 27 member states and in the United Kingdom. That is because, thanks to this agreement, financial commitments already undertaken between 28 will still be respected and honoured between 28. We also have certainty for all individuals and businesses affected by all the other issues involved in the separation. The first press conference I gave 3 years ago, that the social, human, legal, economical, technical consequences would be numerous. So for all these various individuals and businesses concerned by all these other issues, from now on, but there'll be more certainty. I'm thinking of Euratom. I'm thinking about protection of existing intellectual property rights, protection of geographical indications, protection of personal data. Lastly, this proposal also covers the transition period, which was requested by the British government and which will last until the end of 2020, so 14 months from now. And that may last 1 or 2 years further, subject to joint agreement between the United Kingdom and the European Union.
Ladies and gentlemen, the UK government has wanted to open one point in the withdrawal agreement, a key point, the question of the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. Throughout these negotiations, the EU and the UK were fully committed to protect peace, to protect stability on the island of Ireland. We had to reconcile two objectives. First, include a legally operative solution in the withdrawal agreement that would avoid a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, preserve the whole island economy and protect the integrity of the single market. Secondly, a point extremely important to Prime Minister Johnson and the UK was that Northern Ireland remains in the UK's customs territory. Discussions over the past days have at times been difficult, but we have delivered, and we have delivered together. The solution that we found rests on four main elements. Number one, Northern Ireland will remain aligned to a limited set of EU rules, notably related to goods. This means that all applicable procedures on goods will take place at the points of entry into Northern Ireland and not across the island. For this purpose, UK authorities will be in charge of applying the Union's customs code in Northern Ireland. Number two, beyond applicable procedures, there is also the question of customs duties. Northern Ireland will remain in the UK's customs territory. It will therefore benefit from the UK's future trade policy. But Northern Ireland will also remain an entry point into our single market. So, what have we done to square this circle? UK authorities can apply UK tariffs on products coming from third country so long as those goods entering Northern Ireland are not at risk of entering our single market. However, for goods at risk of entering the single market, UK authorities will apply the EU's tariffs. Number three, this night and this morning also, we were working on the issue of VAT. It is an important subject to avoid distortion of competition within the single market for goods. On this point also, we have managed to achieve two objectives: maintain the integrity of the single market, but also satisfy the UK's legitimate wishes. And finally, number four, Prime Minister Johnson and the Taoiseach wanted to ensure long-term democratic support for the application by UK authorities of relevant Union rules in Northern Ireland. 4 years after the entry into force of the protocol, the elected representatives of Northern Ireland will be able to decide by simple majority whether to continue applying relevant Union rules in Northern Ireland or not. This democratic support is a cornerstone of our newly agreed approach. Why? Because this newly agreed protocol is no longer to be replaced by a subsequent agreement between the EU and the UK. So, it makes sense to ensure consent. Ladies and gentlemen, obviously, when discussing Northern Ireland, we talk about the economy, about technical matters, about goods. But let me say very frankly that for me, since day one, since 3 years, what really matters are the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. What really matters is peace. Mesdames, Messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, lastly,
de cette séparation et de l'accord de
beyond the
retrait,
separation and the
nous
withdrawal
avons
agreement,
trouvé un accord,
we've also
et
arrived
c'est pour
at
moi
an
au
agreement,
moins aussi important,
and this is equally important in
pour
my eyes,
réviser la déclaration
to
politique
revise the
qui devra
political
être adoptée par le
declaration
Conseil européen et
which
par le
should
Parlement,
be
et qui
adopted
sera
by the
le
European
cadre
Council and the Parliament.
assez précis
This will be a
de la
quite
négociation,
precise
des
framework
négociations
for
qui vont maintenant
negotiations which
s'ouvrir
will
pour
now
bâtir,
open
rebâtir
to
un
build,
futur partenariat
rebuild
ambitieux
a future
avec
ambitious
l'Union.
partnership with the United Kingdom. a friend, partner, allied country. On this point, Boris Johnson's government has made a clear choice with respect to the future economic relationship, and that is the choice of a free trade agreement. Any reference to other options, particularly the option of creating a single customs territory between us, has been discarded. What does not change, on the other hand, is, if I can put it this way, our geographical proximity, which is for the long term. And this does not change our interdependence with the UK economy, which is very strong. We have agreed on solid guarantees for the level playing field to facilitate an ambitious free trade agreement that is without tariffs and quotas. On this point, I would like to testify, having discussed this often when I visited various parts of the European Union, to the fact that all member states, the European Parliament, national parliaments, and obviously businesses, and the members of the business community whom I've met, have paid a great deal of attention and will continue to do so in terms of having a common pillar of standards that will apply at the end of the transition for social rights, environmental protection, state aid, and taxation matters. In sum, the level of ambition of our future free trade agreement will be very much proportionate to the level and qualities of the economic ground rules that will operate between us, the European Union and the United Kingdom. I've talked about the agreement that we've arrived at over these very intensive days and even nights of negotiation. The text of the agreement is now available, so I hope you enjoy reading it on the basis of the analysis that we'll set out later on with President Juncker to the European Council. Which we have arrived at is that together we have come up with a fair and reasonable result which corresponds to our principles on the European side. Is now for the European Council to assess the content of that agreement and, if it so wishes, to approve the agreement. And that also applies to the European Parliament. I'd like to thank the European Parliament for its confidence, and it is the Parliament which will have the last word. We'll be following through that process as of today. We don't have many days left on the basis of dialogue and respect for our institutions. By way of conclusion, I'd like to say, and that was the subject of my work and ambition over the last my mission over the last 3 years. We finally have a fair and reasonable basis for an ordered withdrawal of the United Kingdom. It's much better than a disordered withdrawal. And if I can put it this way, above all, we hope that as of the 1st of November, as soon as possible, we can start working on a new partnership with the United Kingdom. I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barnier. We have time for about 4 questions, and as has been said, all the information is available online.
Mr. Barnier, Paddy Smith, Irish Times. Is it possible for a deal agreed at this late stage to be ratified by European leaders at this summit, or will they have to call another summit to look at the legal text and finally formalise it?
I think we need to be careful about the terms that we use. There will be no ratification in the Council, but we've done everything we can, including in the past days and nights, to ensure that the Council today will be able to give a favourable opinion on the recommendation that we, together with President Juncker, will give them about the state of negotiations and the draft agreement. It's a draft. As I said at the end of my presentation, on our side, we need the Council to formally approve the agreement after the EP has ratified it. That is the process which will be followed. And yes, as I said in my presentation, there should be no surprises here. Much of the final text can also be found in the agreement that was put forward almost a year ago, so on the priority we give to citizens' rights, certain financial matters, amongst others. But there are some new elements, including on Ireland and Northern Ireland, which I imagine interest you the most, and in the political declaration as well. But answering yes to your question, I did what I did to ensure that Member States will be well informed. We've had several COREPER meetings at 27 of the ambassadors, and yesterday I met them again, and in the previous days I also met the Brexit group in Parliament. I said something very important. Over the past 3 years, with the support of President Juncker, we have been working in full transparency and in constant dialogue. So we have been building this together. It has been built together with the UK, this agreement. And that is why I am confident that it can be supported and ratified in the time between now and the 31st of October.
Let's go to Sky News next.
Mr. Barnier, we have been down this road before. 3 previous agreements fell in the House of Commons. I wonder, have you had an assurance from the Prime Minister that he has the votes to get this one through?
Yes, it's true that we have some experience in this matter. And that is why we use the metaphor of mountaineering. It doesn't mean that there's no emotion here, but we have to be cautious as well. I have done my work, our team has done their work, President Juncker has done his part, and afterwards the Council and Parliament will do their bit, and the House of Commons will have to take that decision as is their responsibility. I was a member of my own national parliament, and I know what that responsibility means. The decision taken by referendum supported by the various governments with whom we've been negotiating means that we have a fair and reasonable agreement, to use Boris Johnson's own words. And we have reached that agreement together in full respect. It hasn't always been easy. Negotiations have been complex. What do you want me to say? I'm the EU chief negotiator. I never wanted, even if some might say, to give any judgment on British political debate. I fully respect those procedures and the debate, which has been a very lively and interesting one. But I never intended for us to judge that, not our role.
Let's have Marcus, was next on my list.
Follow up on the question before, but did you get, apparently it played a role in the negotiations, whether the British government has a majority for the proposal. Did you get any indications or even assurances that there will be a majority? And the second question, if I may, can you explain who exactly is going to control the customs duties? And is it, if it is the UK side, is it possible for the EU to leave it with the UK to do such an important task? Thanks.
I am a political man, and I can well imagine that the Prime Minister, who is also a politician, believes that when he said to President Juncker this morning, I was part of this phone call where we approved the agreement that was reached last night, has faith in his ability to convince the majority he needs in the House of Commons. That's all I can say. He said that based on this agreement and the explanations he intends to give, that he has confidence in his ability to win that vote. That's all I can say on that. Then on Ireland and Northern Ireland. From the get-go, from the first day, we've been aware that this is a unique situation. We have always said this clearly to you. And this unique situation must be dealt with using exceptional solutions. And so all of the questions which our technical team from the task force can deal with, and they will be available in the days to come to answer your questions, to explain the exceptional procedures which have been established to come up with a solution for an exceptional situation. Obviously, the British authorities in Northern Ireland have been working on this together with us and will continue to do so, for example, in customs. Thank you.
Okay, please, it's Laura Kunzberg.
Thank you very much, BBC News. As you say, we have all been here before. You have experience of this. If this deal doesn't pass through Parliament, is this as far as the EU is prepared to go? Is this finally the final deal?
Pourquoi voulez-vous que je réponde à des questions qui ne se posent pas?
Why are you asking me to answer questions that don't arise? You can, of course, ask the question, but the question you're asking is a hypothesis that Mr. Johnson is not looking for, and we don't desire it either, because we're working on an agreement which is likely to meet approval and ratification on both sides. We've had a line that we've set from the outset. And an attitude, let me remind you, for those who've come to this partway through this very long period of 3 years, I've always avoided working or talking on the basis of emotion or passion, even though I note that sometimes that's not been missing, emotion or passion. I've worked on facts, on legal basis, on reality, to come up with objective, legally solid, operational responses to the countless problems thrown up by Brexit, practically across the board and for practically everyone, specifically in Ireland and Northern Ireland. Once again, there is some margin for addition or further detail. I would remind you, for Northern Ireland, there'll be a joint committee, will have a certain mandate and work. There are lots of instruments which will allow us to carry out this work and to implement it. But I think today's agreement is balanced. It's the best possible one after all the various adjustments that we've made. And major changes, particularly for Ireland and Northern Ireland. We, for our part, have accepted that we remove the backstop and we replace it with a new approach. I said this was a cornerstone, and this justifies the consent procedure, by the way, for the solution that we found for Ireland and Northern Ireland to be sustainable. It has to meet with democratic support, and I think it's legitimate that democratic support be verified regularly. That's one of the conditions. So there have been changes, but we have maintained the line in the interest of the United Kingdom wishing to leave the the European Union, the single market and the customs union, and that of the European Union which wishes to remain as it is, a strong single market which is much more than a free trade area, who wants to defend its interests, and I think we've come up with a good, dynamic compromise, if I can describe it, between the United Kingdom and ourselves. That's what I can say. Perhaps one or two questions?
D'accord, c'était Jim, le suivant. Okay. Yes, Sam. Sorry.
Sam Fleming from the Financial Times. I wanted to ask about the customs arrangements. You've said that the UK authorities can apply tariffs, their own system of tariffs, if they've achieved preferential tariffs compared with EU rates, to products as long as there's not a risk of those products entering the single market. How does this text establish what is at risk and what is not at risk of entering the single market? How can that actually be established? And the second question, looking back over the past week, what would you assess as the key turning point where you felt that a deal was actually possible? Because certainly by the time we reached the weekend, things were looking a little bit dicey, to put it mildly. Where do you think the key turning point came, which unlocked this deal? Thank you.
Alors,
Thank you. On the question of the risk to the single market, it's true there's a possibility that goods which arrive from Great Britain in Northern Ireland or from a third country via Great Britain as part of future trade agreements which the UK may sign with third countries, that these goods might not stay in the customs territory of the United Kingdom in Northern Ireland, might leave Northern Ireland to then go across the border, entering the single market. That risk exists. And that is why, together with the UK, we have come up with a mechanism to assess these cases where there may be such a risk or not. And the decision on this risk will be based on a number of criteria. I can give you an overview. That will be the work of the joint committee. So firstly, what is the final destination of these goods? If they are consumer goods, then there's no problem. If they are goods which may be industrial goods, which may then be further processed in Northern Ireland and would then go elsewhere, perhaps in the Republic of Ireland, or immediately, without processing, entering the single market. That is a question that will apply as a criterion to every consignment of goods. And the value of the goods and the risk of infringement of rules in place. These are all decisions which will be taken in great detail by the joint committee, namely by both the EU and the UK, based on the expertise of the competent officials. And we cannot totally eliminate the risk, but we can try to manage it. You asked about a turning point. If we just look at the last 15 days or so, together with the British team led by David Frost, the ambassador, and by all of the team who we thank, every single member of the team that I have headed up is exceptional. We have had a great number of meetings. We call them technical meetings, but I know there's often a lot of politics behind them. All of these meetings were very useful in helping us to understand what the other side wants. The UK team has understood what we mean when we say protection of the single market, consumers and companies. What we mean when we refer to no border on the island of Ireland. I think the turning point, and I'd like to thank him for this, the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, And I would remind you that I have also been negotiating over the past 3 years on behalf of the Republic of Ireland, part of the EU and the single market. The Taoiseach has a particular special responsibility, and he is respected, and we listen to him as a member of the EU. But on behalf of the Irish government, a co-guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement, together with the UK, he decided to meet in Liverpool a few days ago, and it was following that meeting that we were able to, for Ireland and Northern Ireland, able to make headway. It was accepted that there would be no customs checks between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland, and we were part of trying to find an intelligent solution to the problems there. And the UK Prime Minister and Taoiseach came up with the solution in order to ensure democratic support and support in Northern Ireland as well. It's important. This new protocol, this new approach must be a sustainable one, must be supported and verified in a democratic way by the Northern Ireland Assembly. I apologise for going on at length, but I could see that there was mutual goodwill in wishing to find a solution to the most sensitive issues, ensuring the peace in Ireland. Thank you.
OK, on prend encore une question. Lorenzo.
Oui. Bonjour, Monsieur Barnier. Lorenzo Consolian, Asca News Italy.
Hello, Mr. Barnier. I'd like to ask a question about the consent procedure. What happens if at one stage the Northern Ireland Assembly decides that it no longer wishes to adhere to European rules? What happens then? Because then there will be no guarantees. There were guarantees with the backstop, but that's not the case there. And then lastly, on VAT, VAT was mentioned as a problem that arose at the last minute, but we don't know what happened. What's going to happen with VAT? On VAT, finally overnight we came up with an agreement, and you'll see that in detail. There was a point concerning the need for consistency between various VAT rates for everyday consumables for ordinary citizens, and for certain categories of these products there should be no difference between the rights applied. Sometimes it might be zero duty in the Republic of Ireland, whereas next door in Northern Ireland it would have to be the same. So we needed to come up with a mechanism to allow that consistency between rates. So the European system would apply on that premise in Northern Ireland. So we're concerned about the consistency between the systems. Obviously, for all businesses which are paying a lot of attention to that, both in Northern Ireland and in Ireland, there's a logical link here in terms of consistency with what I described, the single market for goods, which would apply in Northern Ireland. I've forgotten your first question, actually. Consent. I certainly have no reason to forget that. What's set out here, and which was sketched out in the discussion between the Taoiseach and the British Prime Minister, would be a regular verification. This new approach, this new protocol, would be supported, therefore, democratically. After the start of, or after the end of the transition period, so that should be the end of 2020, or 2021 or 2022 if the transition period is extended. There would then be a 4-year period within which the new approach, the new protocol would be established on the conditions set out there in legal terms in this draft treaty. At the end of the 4-year period,
les élus
the members of the Northern Ireland Assembly will have an opportunity to vote on the basis of simple majority for the system to be continued.
S'il y a un vote à travers ce qu'on appelle le cross-community vote,
if there is a cross-community vote, as it's described,
la prolongation
for the
pourra
positive
être
vote,
de
then
8
this
ans.
extension could be 8
Si c'est un
years.
vote à la majorité.